Sally Carr said she may be late.
Okay.
And I don't know about Sally Brownfield. So as soon as Bob tells us we're ready to go, we can probably go ahead and get started. And
You are now streaming live to YouTube.
Sally's can join us when they join us. All righty. Thank you. We will call this special school board study session together. This is a study session. We have 4 items on the agenda: transportation budget, child nutrition, job share, shared work, and then a general budget discussion. So with that, Dr. Apostle, do you want to start off with anything?
Sure. You know, I realize that the board has other responsibilities, and these weekly meetings are difficult with everything that you have going on. You know, as your superintendent, I'm open. You know, maybe we can do this every 2 weeks. But like I mentioned to Sandy yesterday, I think we don't want to overkill, but at the same time, we want to keep you informed because things change. And we're in the process of trying to develop ways to bring people back to work within a reasonable manner. And I wouldn't want to take off one way or the other without at least touching base with you, because I don't want you to be caught flat-footed in the community with anything to do with the budget. So what we can do is we can try to expedite these meetings to, you know, and get through it as fast as we can. But it's like Brenda and I talked about, you know, in the board meeting, sometimes maybe you just don't want to say what you want to say in terms of some of these issues, and the time that we have in a board meeting with all the things that we need to talk about, sometimes it doesn't work out where you really have the time to say what you want to say. And I know this is a public meeting, but you know, it's just another opportunity for the board to ask questions, to make comments as it relates to these very important issues. Let's do it this way. Are there any questions regarding the transportation budget?
Unless something has changed from the Tuesday night presentation.
No.
I can tell you that I did just receive just a few minutes ago the bulletin with our actual reporting dates for this year.
Oh,
So
okay.
our reporting dates are going to be October 30th. So we will be able to put a few students on that because we're starting to work on bringing the small groups back and building some routes around that. It won't be a lot, but at least we'll have a few students. Then again on February 1st and then May 3rd.
May 3rd?
Yes.
Those are the count days?
Those are our reporting dates for ridership.
For ridership.
Right.
February what again?
1st.
1st. Okay. October 30th, February 1st, and May 3rd.
Yes.
All right.
So we have 6 bus drivers on our rolls right now, and Holly, and the two mechanics.
Right, and 1 secretary right now.
And 1 secretary. And we've got 37 bus drivers that are not with us.
Right.
37. So if we don't have, hi Sally, if we don't have students riding the bus, and we're delivering food right now with the 6 bus drivers that we have, how would we use some of those 37? That's the issue. And the other issue related to this is if we bring everybody back, we could be in this same situation that we're going through. We could be in the same situation in the spring. So I just want to make sure that you understand that if we're not careful bringing people back and monitoring the budget and monitoring our enrollment, what we're going through now, if we brought people back more so than we should, we'll have to do the same thing again in the spring. And nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, Alex, I am concerned about that because I don't want to deal with the backlash that we're now dealing with all over again if we bring back too many people. But at the same time, there's an article in the journal today that came out of all of our surrounding smaller school districts. And what I am wondering as a parent and as a community member is what are all of those schools doing with these people? They're
Well,
saying North Mason, yes, is making reductions, but they're saying that's because of their lost levy. But Pioneer is not, Southside is not, Merriam Knight is not, and I understand they're small, but what
they're
are their
very
customers
small, Carrie.
And
It's a completely different
yeah,
ball game. When you've
I
got,
talked to the business manager at Pioneer because she used to work in my department here. And she said they are making cuts. She actually emailed me again today to check on our enrollment because their enrollment's low.
I'd have to take a look at the
Yeah.
journal article I just
Okay.
read today to see if they were saying based on something, but it was looking to me like these surrounding small school districts, with the exception of us and North Mason. Um, and I think that Hood Canal was saying that they were having to do some, but the other smaller schools
Mhm.
were not saying that they were making any cuts at this time, that they might have to. And so that's, I'm just wondering what these different approaches are and what they are doing with people that also are not working.
So I
And there's,
can tell you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I can tell you on South Side, they have 2 buses. And they are doing meal routes with those, but they're going to have to change those because they were coming into our district serving meals, we discovered. So we've already contacted them and said, you can't do that. You have to stay in your district. So our routes that start Monday are taking over some of the locations they were delivering to because they were our routes in the spring.
okay.
So, but I don't know. I know Pioneer, when we started discussing our layoffs, I called Liz and actually talked to her about theirs, and they were making cuts. And I know Ashley out at North Mason, she actually was our state auditor 2 years ago. So I called her directly, and according to her, it's not just the double levy failure. They had laid off some in the spring, so they beat us to it a little bit um, in that case. So I don't know. I'm concerned. I asked Liz about them using their bus drivers at Pioneer, and she said they were using their fund balance to pay the little bit that they were doing.
and when you have a school district of 175 kids or 300 kids or
Right.
500 kids, it's a different scenario. It's a different ball game than a school that's got over 4,000 kids. Well, I was at an ESD superintendent's meeting on Tuesday, and we had superintendents that these small districts in Grays Harbor, and they said everything's perfect, everything's great.
No, no.
Well, they've got about 100 kids.
Yeah.
It's not as complex. Um,
No, but the public perception on that disparity is difficult to deal with as a community member and a board member and a parent of kids in the school.
Yeah, but it's so ridiculous to compare us to South Side. To be honest with you, there's no comparison. There just isn't. And if I were a board member and somebody started talking about Hood Canal and South Side, I'd say, I beg your pardon. There's no similarities between the two districts. They're much different. The issues are much different. The unions are much different. I mean, we're battling how many? We've got 7 unions, isn't it?
That's more than that when you take the coaches. So
I mean,
yeah,
it's
I got 9.
this is a complex little organization. And we can't compare ourselves to the South Sides and the Pioneers and the Hood Canals. And people that do that are not being fair. They're not being fair at all.
I think it'd be helpful. I mean, I'm a visual person, and it helped me when Brenda was explaining about was it 30 some percent is
38.5. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just wondering if you could put that together visually, like here's how much money we're getting funded for transportation. Here's how much it would cost us to bring all 37 drivers back. You know, even if we could do routes to every, you know, let them run their normal routes to deliver packets and Wi-Fi hotspots and meals and, you know, all of those things. But it would be helpful to say, this is what the actual cost is, and just show that difference, because I think it does make a difference when we're talking about the number of kids and the number of drivers and the total cost. But without really seeing that gap, I think it's difficult for people to understand, why aren't we, if we're getting the funding, why are we not having the buses go out? And I agree. And I actually just literally hung up on a call with some legislators, and they're talking about, you know, the K through 20% reduction, but they are saying, you know, that they believe when the legislature's back in session that we will have some guarantees about funding, but we just don't know what that's going to be. So I think we have to spell it out very clearly so people can, you know, hear those numbers. I mean, we hear the numbers, but visually we got to show, what does that mean cost wise?
You know, we could do that. We could have an open forum, and we could just focus on those types of issues and spell it out and diagram it out and let people know, you know, this is a much different situation here in Shelton, and comparing us to South Side with 175 kids and 2 buses versus, I mean, it's a completely different operation. But I think you're right, Lynn. I think we've got to educate the public that there is a significant difference between the surrounding school districts and Shelton.
What about the school districts that are more comparable to Shelton? What are they doing? The Tumwaters and the Aberdeens, and, you know, like, I'm just thinking about the districts that are that we play in sports. Like, you know, what are some of the things that they're having to do? You know, because that would be, in my opinion, a better comparison.
I agree.
I spoke to Aberdeen because I know Elise very well. She actually started in her business major position at another district than Aberdeen when I started in business major here. They are making some major cuts. They also started in the spring when the school shut down to do some cuts. She said it's pretty volatile there, similar to what it is here with the community right now. But I could see if I can get some specifics out of her, but they were doing some major layoffs.
I think that would be good to, you know, to compare us to similar size districts.
Mm-hmm.
Aberdeen, Hoquiam.
Well, and we saw
I
an
can't think of all
article.
of them. Pardon?
We saw the article about the cuts in Olympia, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then we, you know, you've got places like Battleground, which are just a little about the same size as us. You know, they cut over, I think now it's up towards 150 people have been cut there. So, you know, getting the information out, like Lynn was talking about, and what Sally's inferring and what Carrie mentioned, I think it would be a wise thing to do. It would put things in perspective. And I think we need to do that as soon as possible in September, and have maybe 5 or 6 districts that are similar in size, and then show South Side, Hood Canal, and so on, and see, so they can see the difference in operation. It's night and day. You know, when I was in that meeting on Tuesday and I was listening to superintendents with 90 kids in the district, and they were saying everything was wonderful, I had to bite my tongue, because I just, they're in a different world. You know, they're in a completely different world. One district was bringing the kids face to face. Well, if you've got one schoolhouse and you've got, you know, X number of teachers, yeah, you can do that. But we can't do that right now. But the other thing I want you to be aware of, and I know you are, but, you know, we can bring satisfaction to a lot of people right now. But we'll be crying later. I almost can guarantee it. You know, if we start bringing people back, like Carrie was saying, we start bringing a lot of people back, we're going to go through the same thing that we're going through now in the spring. Because in the spring, people are going to come forward. They're going to want to negotiate contracts with raises and things like that. So if we bring people,
Can I also jump in, because it was really interesting to me over the Labor Day weekend. I was in Westport and I was approached by a teacher that I don't know from Bordeaux, but who recognized me. And this was a perspective that we don't hear a lot of. And I thought it was interesting to hear. She was very supportive of the board and the decisions that we made. She said that as a teacher, she really likes the K-12 platform, but she's having to learn the curriculum herself, and that there's no way she could have a para working alongside with her, because as a para, and I'm not in education, so I don't know all of these things, but she was saying as a teacher, you have to create the plan for the para. And right now she needs to learn the plan herself and be teaching it. And that, in her opinion, there isn't a use for that situation for her. I know we hear a lot about the para situations with special needs children, and I am curious about that, and if we have enough people there. I'm curious about if we have enough secretaries, considering the very professional comment from Jolene Scott in our board meeting. And I also get concerned about losing too many bus drivers because of a CDL. But believe me when I say I do not want to bring the bulk of people back to be satisfactory, especially after we just pulled the Band-Aid off. I don't want to do that again. I want to staff things the way that we need to have them staffed, and bring back people that we do feel like are needed. I don't want to, end up with a, angry parent situation because we don't have somebody answering the phones. I also hear from teachers, and I know that they have negotiated contracts. So every time people want to talk about repurposing people, I know that that's not as easily done as it is said. But it sounds to me like currently we have a lot of teachers that are twiddling their thumbs. There are teachers that are, they don't necessarily have a lot of things to be doing, because in some of the schools, they're focusing on the core four. So you have people that do have the capacity to do things. And I come from private industry. So in my industry, you always work really hard. It's not just about doing the job that's outlined to you. So I don't always understand all of that either, but I've had some very interesting conversations with a few people lately that have surprised me too.
well,
Very good comments and observations. And you're right. I've heard that from other teachers too, that, it takes a little bit of work and planning to be able to use the paras effectively in your class. So
I've heard that for years in a traditional model where teachers have said to me, Alex, I don't have the time to train the para to really help me. That's in a traditional sense. So it's nothing new to hear a teacher say, I don't have the time to train the para to really be useful to me. I need the time for myself, especially during these times. So I know you understand this, but I think it's important that we talk about it, because everybody in this meeting wants to have people come back to work, but we've got to be very careful.
do we have dates set for community forums this school year?
No, not yet.
Okay. All righty.
But
So-
I believe we need an open forum before the end of September to display some of the things that we've just talked about.
Absolutely. I think so. And somebody else had made a comment about, budgets not really being due. I know we had a timeline, and it's based on what size school we are. So I'm guessing there are different size schools that have different submission dates, but I'm thinking they're probably all still fairly close.
Yes, the smaller districts is actually before our date. I
Okay.
don't know exactly what it is because I really don't pay attention to it because I focus on ours. We're considered a first-class district due to our size, and that's what gives us the July 10th date, and then adoption by August 31st. But
Somebody
the
was
smaller
talking about,
districts typically, I know, have theirs adopted by like June 30th, I believe.
I think somebody had mentioned in public comment that some districts don't have to do it until October.
No, that's not true.
I was not aware of any districts that had till after the start of school that,
No,
um,
no. There is, I'm just curious if they're confusing some things. Like our financial statements, I'm starting the close now, which the due date is October 26th. So maybe they're confusing budget with actually the financial statement. I don't know.
that could be, that could be. All righty. Thank you very much for that clarification. We'll let, is any other questions or comments on transportation before we move on to child nutrition?
I just want to clarify, and Brenda, clarifying to the board that we're going to get our budget through January. But if we don't have ridership, that's the problem.
That's correct. What we're working on right now is Holly's trying to get from all the schools the groups of kids they're wanting to bring back so we can build efficient routes across the whole district. We want to look at the district as a whole. So doing that, Lynn has her cat. Doing that, potentially we'll bring a couple drivers at the top of the layoff list back for some smaller hours, and hopefully the shared work program too is what we'll try to get them into. But that small ridership is probably not going to impact this dollar amount very much, if any. So I'm actually, Holly and I tried to get, there's a STARS, the program that does the funding for transportation and where you report the ridership is called STARS. And there's a calculator tool in there, but it wasn't working 2 days ago when Holly and I were in there together trying to play with it a little bit just to see what it looked like. But, you know, the funding they're giving us right now is based on last year's allocation, and it's only for those 5 months. So the caution from ESD and OSPI was you need to really pay attention to that, because there is potential you might have to pay back if you have no ridership in your
Right
account.
now, we have no real ridership.
We don't have anything right now.
Right.
Except 2 special ed kids, and that's it.
And that's the scary part. The
Yeah.
other piece overall, and I'll drop it, is it's an integrity piece. These school districts that are bringing people back, I don't know how they're employing everybody. You can only do so many things. And if we were to bring people back and we can't keep them working, there would be public outcry, because as soon as somebody would say, hey, I'm getting paid, but nobody's really told me what to do, or I did what I was supposed to do, but since that time, nobody's really assigned me any more work, that would be absolutely terrible in the community. They'd come at us in that respect. So, and as your superintendent, I would not want to be involved in anything that wasn't for real and that wasn't valuable in terms of work. Because you would look at me, if the community lashed out and said, you know, you brought all these people back, but they're not working, you would say to me, Alex, why did you do that? Why didn't you keep them busy? Well, I didn't know what to, we didn't have any work. You know, so you're between a rock and a hard place in this situation as a superintendent. You want to bring people back, but you want to bring them back under the right circumstances. And right now, we can't employ all the people that we laid off. It would be impossible. It'd be completely false. So that's it on that one. I won't say any more. Child nutrition.
Yep.
So are there any questions based on what I shared at the board meeting? And then I can give you a little update on where we are on our 2 routes that we're starting on Monday.
I think we're ready for the updates on the 2 routes that will start on Monday.
Okay, so what will be happening, this additional 2 routes, our numbers are really low at Evergreen for meals. I think we served maybe 50 today, and we have 3 people working there. That's way too many people for 50 meals. So we're going to pull 1 person off of Evergreen and have them go on one of the bus routes. And then we'll be calling 1 person back off the layoff list for the other bus route. What is critical with this, you have to have your routes at the same time as your feeding times per child nutrition. You can't have your bus route at 4 o'clock at night because there's a possibility that they could double get their meals, and that's not allowable per the federal government. So we're running the bus route just right alongside of our times that we're doing our feeding. We are starting Monday, expanding the time from 10:30 to 12:30 because we've had several parents ask because they come on their lunch hour. So we've done that extension. So our 2 routes, we have finalized them today. I'm getting that out to Katie so she can get that posted out to everyone. There's the Blevins Road up by Airport Grocery. They will go to Springfield Park Development and then to Oak Park Development. So we did Springfield Park and Oak Park last year, and those were pretty successful. And we've had lots of requests for the Blevins Road. So that's why we're picking that as a starting point. On the south end of town, we're doing the Cole Road Park and Ride. We're going to Bond Lake again. We did that last year. And then we're going to the fire station on Lynch Road and Summers Drive. And then we'll go back to Taylortown. And then that will be the end of that route. So that's where we're going to start. We could potentially, depending on how those go, add a couple more to get more meal counts. That's what we're trying to do, is get our counts up. Because right now we're not generating enough money to even cover the 9 staff members that I currently have on board. So.
And they can only take for that student. They can't take for a brother or a sister, and they can't do lunch and dinner.
They can take for, what they can do is the parent can sign the waiver that they were doing in the spring, so they can take for the whole family. It's back free for infant to 18-year-olds again. So they can take for the whole family. And we give them a breakfast and lunch when they come. So.
Are those waivers available for them to sign then when they come to pick up those meals if they're needing to renew that waiver?
Yes.
Or so
Yeah.
that people...
They'll carry them on the bus. They keep a current list of who has already signed the waivers with them. So the people, they get where they know everybody anyway, but
Right.
they ask them their name and they check it off if it's on their list too. So.
Well, and that's why I'm wondering, like so if Evergreen is diminishing so much, are there neighborhoods in that area for that particular elementary district that can be put on some type of route? Because I know that, these other ones are kind of the too far reaches. That's right in our downtown area. Are there neighborhoods that would be a good stopping point for that area?
So that's what we'll look at next once we get, because we have to give this stuff to Child Nutrition OSPI to approve before we can start it. So we're starting with these, and that's what we'll look at next. What I did with Holly for the route south of town, I had her look at ridership for me to see where there were bigger pockets of ridership, and that's how we picked those stops on that one. So we can do the similar thing with downtown.
Well, because I'm just wondering then if a lot of those kids walk to school, but then if they're walking to school, why couldn't they walk over there to pick up the meals? And you're saying they're not doing that. So
No. Yeah.
And no stop down around the tribes.
We're right now, they're serving their own meals. They have their own child nutrition program.
Okay.
And they have notified us that they're doing their own. So we can't infringe upon that.
Any other questions or comments on child nutrition?
That one changes almost daily too. So, but.
I think we're ready to move on to number 3 then.
Okay. We met today with elementary principals and with secondary principals, 2 different meetings. But we started talking about secretaries and how important secretaries are in terms of the overall functioning of a school. And having been a high school principal, I have a deep appreciation for what the principals were telling me, especially when parents are needing information about K-12 and registration and those types of things. To make a long story short, we're going to do, with your support, what we want to do is the secretaries in the buildings right now have a contract that goes to September 28th. What we'd like to do is, there's 2 options here. We'd like to extend it a month, which would give us some additional time to figure out how we can do a job share and work with the union. And that would be the first group of people. And I think that we're talking 7 positions. It's about $44,000 if we extended it a month. And if we do the job share, we wouldn't have to pay the unemployment benefit, but Brenda and I are kind of analyzing which way to go on that. But basically, we want to bring our secretaries back to some degree. And the principal said, we would love that. We need that, especially when we're trying to promote families and children to come to our schools. If they walk in and there's one secretary running for her life or his life, that's not going to really promote what we're trying to do. And that is to bring students and families into our school district. So sticking with the fact that we've cut 7 secretarial positions, it's kind of like cutting your nose to spite your face. It doesn't work.
Actually, it's more than that. I think it's 10 total.
Is it 10?
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is, it's around 40-some thousand. And, do we have a lot of money to spend? No, but we would lose if we let the secretaries go and not try to bring them back in some fashion. It would be very hurtful. And so we're going to try to, that's the first group we're going to try to bring back. Are you okay with us investigating that and moving forward with that and continuing to look at job sharing as much as possible within fiscal responsibility, but taking a look at job share, but first dealing with the secretarial positions in our schools, all 7 of them.
We actually, Darlene just sent me, she was working on the application for job share. So she has just emailed it to me to review. I have a couple blanks I need to fill in for them, and then we'll get that off to Employment Security. They have to approve it for us. But Darlene and I both looked at our bus drivers that are still working and our food service people that are still working. And we believe all of them will fit into the job share category. So that unemployment cost for the difference in their hours will be paid by the federal government and save us on those.
You don't have that figure, do you?
No, we won't see it till the bill comes in for the first bill, and that'll take a couple
it is a good savings for the district.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So at the same time, we're saying we need to be very cautious. We are looking at the system and saying, we can't have schools without secretaries. That just doesn't work. So we're going to try to make something happen there.
Does each school currently have 1 secretary?
Not yet. They, in their contract, they had that 20-day notice. So the layoff secretaries will be through the 28th of September. At that point in time, your 3 elementaries go down to 1. OMS and Oakland Bay would go to 2. And then we reduced at the high school also, and transportation also. So if we extend them staying on, which we can, I called Lance today and got the guidance on what we need to do to make that happen if we choose to do that. If we go for, he said you can use any timeline. You could do a week, you could do 30 days. They would stay where they're at in their buildings and be fully staffed. So,
But it would also buy us time to look deeper into how we can make some of this all work. Not only with secretaries, but if we come up with a plan with secretaries, it may transfer over to the other groups in terms of job sharing, in terms of working out something. So, but all this would be done very cautiously, and we would not move, I guarantee you, without discussing the ramifications with you ahead of time.
Could I sort of have a basic idea of what job share is, but maybe could you give a little bit more of an explanation? I mean, the title itself sort of indicates probably what it is, but I just want to be sure I'm completely understanding
Sure, good
what we're
question.
talking about.
so actually, in my opinion, the title is very deceiving from doing the training the other day. And I think that's where people sometimes are struggling with how it's going to work. So I did a 2-hour training with employment security, and so did Darlene Eichhorn in the HR department on Tuesday, I believe it was. So what it truly is the job share, it fills in the gap of paying the unemployment if you have reduced the employee's hours. You can reduce them from 10 to 50%. If they go below the 50% reduction, then they don't qualify for the job share benefit from the federal government. So all of the people we currently have on are in that category, that they're at least 50% or above their normal hours. So they would fit into that. People truly aren't sharing jobs. I guess you could term it that if you had an 8-hour employee and you brought 2 back at 4 hours each or something. But in our method, it really isn't a job share. It's just bringing them back in some partial hours, and then the federal government would pay the unemployment benefit from there. So
Okay, that sort of makes sense. Yeah, the title is misleading then. So talking about secretaries, I mean, this may be a little bit, we may not have thought about that, but how would that potentially look like then for our secretarial group, for example?
So a suggestion I asked today, I was in I was in both principal meetings, but this morning when it was the big topic with the elementaries, I asked if bringing their secretaries back half-time would benefit them, because they were worried about covering breaks and lunches for the one secretary there, which I get it. They're getting a lot of phone calls from parents with needing help with K-12, that type of thing. So it's a great PR thing that we have the people there answering and helping. So my thought was, you at least have to bring them back for the 4 hours, because all of our secretaries are 8-hour positions. So from there, they would all qualify for that job share benefit. We could just decide how that needs to look to make the best use of their time. So.
What about the prospect maybe even of one school or 2 schools sharing one secretary?
We have a meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock with the principals I told them to bring ideas forward, and that's a good idea there that we can discuss.
And is the secretary in the building, or is the secretary answering phones still from home?
In the building.
They are at the schools working.
Okay.
So how do you feel about us pursuing that with the principals tomorrow and trying to work something out to either extend the contract to some extent or getting into job share? You feel okay with that? And then what we'll do, if we land on a plan, we'll bring it forward to you and to the public and let people know this is what we're going to do with secretaries, and what we're planning to do with possibly paras might be similar, and with bus drivers and so on. We're trying and we're listening to our principals. They were very happy today that we would consider doing something differently. And of course we are. We want to do everything we can to support our people, to support our families and our kids. But we need to do it very responsibly And it's real important that every step we take from now on, the board needs to do, and the board and the public, they need to know exactly what we're doing, because we don't want any surprises in the spring. One of the things that I'm, it's a very important objective for me, and that's to have a clean and in the black and tidy budget. That to me is everything as a superintendent in his final years of being a superintendent. I want to leave the district in great shape, or as great a shape as possible. And that needs to start now, like we have, even though it's very difficult. But we don't want to be looking at each other in the spring wondering what we did. And that's why it's very important, even though it's time consuming for you. And I hate to bring you in, quite frankly, every Thursday, but I want you to be aware of what's happening, what I'm thinking, what Brenda's thinking, what you're thinking about as we move through these are turbulent times. A lot of unknowns in terms of the budget for next year. We're hearing the same horror stories, that we've been hearing, and they're continuing. So I think, moving forward together and sharing information is going to be critical. And I like the idea of having the open forum and sharing the information and comparing, so everybody understands that it's just not Shelton that's going through these things. It's everybody.
Right.
So, yeah.
Without without the students in the school, I mean, it's hard to imagine that there's a lot of parents coming into the building to ask questions. So my thought is maybe there's one secretary in the building, and then there's, could there be like a backup secretary by phone to help answer phone calls if the secretary that's there in person has someone in person to deal with? Or are there limitations into getting into Skyward and the different softwares that are used by secretaries? I mean,
So they can get into Skyward from home,
They
because
can.
I get in every day. I am
Okay.
in Westpac every day. If Bob is here listening, Bob, can you help me with the phone system? Can they answer a district phone from their house?
Now, well, any person can set a forward
Okay.
to go to any number. In other words, every person who has an individual phone, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that says forward all. You press the forward all button, you key in the number that you want to forward it to, whether it's your home phone, your cell phone, your neighbor's phone, whomever. All calls coming to that extension will then go out to that designated number. The problem then comes in is if you have to call back. At the current moment, we are not set up to obscure the calling or the calling number. So if you get a phone call that's redirected to your home number, when you call back, your home number shows up on caller ID. Okay. If you press *67 to obscure that caller ID on a per call basis, if you run into somebody who has call blocking or anonymous call rejection turned on, you're stuck. They're blocking your anonymous call. So, but yes, we can forward any phone to any phone. Unfortunately, it has to be done from the phone itself. There's no way that I can remotely set up, say as an example, I can't set up Brenda's phone from remotely to forward to her cell phone. It has to be done from the front panel of the phone itself.
I guess I'm not really sure why, unless the secretary themselves are uncomfortable being in the building. I don't really see why they wouldn't be in the building. You do have a majority of the teachers that are in the building as well. and they may need help with something. Or, I
Mhm.
mean, I'm seeing from my own daughter's experience, my daughter's teacher's computer crashed. She was able to go into the classroom of another teacher that wasn't there, get on their computer. I mean, there's people that are helping each other out safely within the building. So to me, it
Yeah.
seems like, wouldn't it be more effective, unless it's a health concern for them during COVID, to just be in the building? I don't, whether there's traffic, I mean, I'm, as a parent, hoping that eventually we increase the student traffic in the schools. I mean, it is
That's
not
right.
easy doing what I am doing with my children and trying to work from home. It is not easy for any of the parents that I'm talking to. Just like in the spring, it is that same ramped up stress level all over again. The education that my kids are getting is better. I can see that. But for me, trying to work at home and navigate their questions and everything that's going on, it is very difficult.
No doubt about it. And a lot of those parents, from what the principal said today, now this is what they told us, is that a lot of those parents come into the school and it's a beehive
I'm sure.
at times. And that's why they were asking, is there anything that we can do to keep our secretaries, or to work something out where we have our secretarial help? And that's why we kind of called an emergency meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock, for them to come back with their ideas. I will share with them some of the ideas that have come up this evening, um, and see what they have to say. But it's a great place to start in terms of bringing people back, because that's where we're going to have tremendous impact. Those are the people that face the public every day. And if they're not there, they can't do what I've asked them to do, and that is for everybody to, all hands on deck to recruit parents and kids to come to our school district. And they're doing it. They're working very hard. Secretaries, counselors, teachers, administrators, they're going out there and they're pounding the pavement to get people to come back to school. So we're going to do everything we can, but we're not going to do, obviously, anything that you can't support. And once we come up with a plan, I'd like to be able to come back in a meeting such as this first, and then go public with it, so that the public knows that we're trying to bring people back to honest work that's necessary to keep our district moving forward. But you'll see it first, and then we take it out on the road and let people know how much it's going to cost and why we're doing it.
Well, and that's where, I mean, as a parent with kids in the school district, I would like to see this tied to the plan of either going in, like today I was on the statewide school board call, and the Evergreen School District school board member had notes from their superintendent, and they were saying that their goal is to get to a hybrid situation in October. Do we have a set time frame like that? Because if we did, this all ties into positions that we would need to have in the buildings, people that we would need to have in place if we're aiming for this. And obviously it's based on health parameters, and we don't
Right.
know what the fall flu season is going to bring. But looking at the Southern Hemisphere, places that are having their flu season right now, it's very low. So if we are like, do we have a goal for that, so that when we're having these public conversations, we can't just, there's going to be additional reasons why we might want to have the minimal staff that we can bring back, so that we have that in place for when we have larger groups of students coming into our schools.
Yeah, we've discussed all of that, and our subcommittee work has really put us in a position to where we could move quickly into a hybrid situation. But the health department needs to call that shot.
So here's another question for you. When you say that, we have a health department meeting coming up, and they were wanting to know agenda items. Should I ask them to formally speak to where the status of the school districts are in their opinion? Because to be honest with you, right now, Dave Wyndham thinks that we are at a point where we can do some in-person instruction.
And we're in the process of doing that in special circumstances. But again, it's a concern I'm sure every one of us has. We don't want to pull the trigger too quickly in the fall, late fall, winter, and then have something happen. And I can predict that some districts are going to pull the trigger and they're going to have a problem. So it's so difficult. I mean, I would love to say we're going to go face to face in starting November 1 or October 15th, but who knows what October 15th and November 1st are going to be all about. I mean, this thing could get out of hand or it could subside. And then if it does, we can come together and make a decision what we want to do. But there's no science to this. It's absolutely a guessing game. And even the scientists, the medical people, they can't really tell us what's going to happen during the winter. Fauci said, I have no idea what could happen with the flu and with the virus, COVID-19. He says, I can't tell you what's going to happen. So for people to look at the data as it stands now and say, we're going to start school face to face on October 15th.
They were phasing in hybrid situations, and
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. I
but
mean,
even in a hybrid situation, there are districts that are saying we're going to go to a hybrid situation, but we're not going to screen. There are districts that are saying that if we go to a hybrid, it's just too complicated to do all the screening and everything else. We're just going to go to the hybrid model and hope for the best. So I don't know.
Well, I guess part of what I've been thinking about lately, along with sort of piggybacking on what Carrie's saying here, is we do sort of have a phased approach for how we would like to get back to school. And like Carrie was saying, as we're doing that phased approach, we're going to need to be looking at things like staffing, additional people to help with checking kids into school and all that kind of thing, who is going to be doing those particular jobs. And so that would potentially affect staffing as we're moving forward. So we sort of have an idea of what phase 2 is going to look like as we go to that hybrid model. Maybe we need to revisit that. The task force maybe need to revisit that now that we have more information from the state. And we're sort of seeing what other folks are doing. Maybe want to move towards elementary first. But what jobs then are going to be tied to that, and so that what's that going to mean in terms of staffing, and then what's that going to mean in terms of costs? I think those are all things that we can start thinking about at this point, and we can probably even start thinking along the lines of what are some of those milestones that we would need to hit before we moved into the next phase. Do we what's our school district's comfort level with to move to phase 2? What's it going to be in terms of what the health department says, what we're observing, that kind of thing. So that's some of the things that I've been thinking about. Is that what you're thinking, Carrie, a little bit?
yes. And then also that plays into those negotiation conversations with our staff, because then it is a matter of, can you be repurposed while we go through these transitions? Are you open to that? Because, depending on what your job is, the needs may have to flex a little bit while we go back to these, different situations.
Yeah, and that maybe makes putting MOUs in place ahead of bringing some of those people back a little easier to do. I would guess it would make Brenda and Terry's job easier.
Let me tell you, coming up with MOUs these days, very complex, very difficult, very time consuming. And, when you put it, we can put any kind of a plan together, but there's one variable that is something that I said 6-7 months ago, the WEEA. And their nose is in every contract, classified and certified. And it is tough to move. They want to grieve every step of the way, not only here in Shelton, but everywhere. So, we can put a plan together. We can work with the unions to put a plan together, but they have their own agenda.
And
Trust
I've
me
thought
on
of that too, as I've listened to all of this stuff. And then at that point, doesn't that become, that becomes the push and shove in a school district, and that's public, right? We're trying
Exactly.
we're trying to do what we can to put things safely in place. This is an obstacle that we're facing. It just is what it is. And now we can't move any further until, because of that. Whether that ends up being immovable or not. I hope not, but you know, I don't know.
Yeah, teachers are striking all over the country. They're rebelling all over the country. Lance is helping us with our classified work. We met with him. When was it? Yet
Yesterday. Yep.
Yeah. Was it yesterday already?
Yeah, just yesterday.
All right. But he seemed bewildered in terms of the issues that are being brought up at every turn. I mean, every turn. And it's hard to explain other than to say the unions are being very obstinate and they're challenging. If we move here, they're going to move over there. And so, yes, we could come up with a very detailed plan. But unless we get buy-in from the unions, it's not going anywhere for a while.
Are the unions okay then with these small groups coming back in?
We don't even know that yet.
So that is the first step,
Yes.
is these small groups and, you know, following the safety precautions and keeping those at less, like no more than 10, and seeing if they even agree to that.
You know, there's so much to all this, I would hate to comment. I've already commented too much in public format. So,
Sally, I can tell you that we have looked at some of the staffing in the hybrid model of what we need, especially for custodians, cleaning. Probably Paris doing the check-in of the kids to get them in the building. So we do have a lot of that already kind of prepared to be able to tag onto and move forward with when we start heading that direction.
we have all the safety precautions laid out. I mean, the subcommittees did a heck of a job. I mean, they gave us the platform from which to move forward in terms of a hybrid model. That's what the subcommittee work was all about, was moving into a hybrid model. And of course, if we go to a traditional model, which I'm not sure what that's going to look like anymore, that's a completely different ballgame. And I'm hoping, regardless of the model that we go to, that we have the revenue to support the model, the enrollment to support the model. You would think if we went to a traditional model or a hybrid model, we'd have no problem with enrollment, but you can't really say that you will not have a problem. So I guess it's one step, one day at a time, but yet having a plan in terms of what may happen, and we have one. If the numbers are there in terms of enrollment and they say go back to school, we can do that. We can do that now.
I guess one comment that I would make, just having seen my own grandkids, they're going back to a hybrid model for 2 weeks, and then they're going to go back to, the plan is, in-person school. And, my thought is that 2 weeks is going to be very chaotic. I think the transition time should be longer. So I would hope that if we do a hybrid one, that we're in it long enough to get, settled in the routine and how it works before moving on to another model.
What would be very difficult is if we move too quick to a hybrid model and something other than what we expected happened, and then we'd have to go back to what we're trying to do now. Yeah. That's not a pretty picture either.
Yeah.
But we've got to try. We've got to try. But when we try, we need to make sure that that the safety and health of our people it's pretty good. It's pretty safe. And we have people that are telling us that it's safe from the medical profession and scientific community that are saying it is safe for you to go back to school. And then if something happens, we're going to feel terrible, but at least we have some support. that this was the right thing to do at that particular time. We're only human. We can't really predict everything. Um,
Mention that on the statewide call again today, using that decision tree. And, you know, that if you stay within the boundaries of things like that, that those would be the barriers of, or the boundaries of liability that you would be dealing with. If you throw those to the wayside and do what you want to do, you're going to have problems.
yes.
You know, so it is doing that. And I would just say that, again, having children that are going through this and listening to my children's classes and listening to my friends, all of these kids want to go back. They all want to go back and see their teacher, and they want to have that. I mean, today they were doing icebreakers all day long, and the teachers were like, "What's your favorite thing about K-12?" And they're like, "I get to see you and I get to see my friends." And then they would ask, you know, what is a challenge for you with this? And they're like, "We wish that we were there in school in person." And even one of the teachers said, if we did this as a hybrid, but they even used K-12 in their classroom, if you had to go back, you know, I mean, like thinking through all the ways that you could potentially, you know, use some of this if that is the case. But, you know, there's probably going to be about 30% of people that want to stay doing the online thing, but there are so many other kids that, and I know personally a couple of elementary age kids that are really struggling doing this online. They're throwing
Oh, yeah.
fits. They just can't deal with the fact that they have to sit and look at a computer all day long. And that's really challenging. I'm thankful my children are not having that kind of a problem, but it's just, you know, if you think about it, these kids don't ever leave their homes.
Mhm.
My kids don't ever go anywhere.
Yeah,
Our
it's terrible.
gymnastics gym finally opened back up again, and they wear masks and they're in groups of like 5 when they're in there, and the gym is at 25% capacity. And I go and I do that with them, and I sit in the stands with a mask on because it's the only time they ever leave my house.
Yeah,
They're not.
it's a terrible situation for sure. Well, the other side of this, we might wake up one day and they've developed a vaccine that's legitimate. You know, that is a vaccine that we can trust, and we can get inoculated, and things change. So there's always that possibility. I know they're working feverishly. There's no question about it. We must be. So
I will say, being in the pharmaceutical industry, they're they're they are, and there's 3 companies that will have potentially phase 3 clinical trials closing around the end of October and early November. But the deal with any of those vaccines is that they will come out in a tiered structure on who gets them first. And it
Mhm.
most likely will go to like healthcare professionals and people that are working those front lines with sick people. And then, you know, I don't know how they're going to structure that, but it won't necessarily be like our families and our kids
mhm,
that get those
sure.
first. And they did talk on the statewide school board call today too. They were kind of saying they keep hearing about testing and testing capacity in the state of Washington. And there's been news about other tests like saliva tests that are rapid. But the problem with that is that they haven't been tested and proven to show in asymptomatic people. So while that sounds like that could be potentially useful too, it wasn't tested in children and it wasn't showing asymptomatic. So I just think that some of these things are not necessarily going to happen immediately. But
Right.
what we may see, what I hope to see, and I'm hopeful, I know it may not happen, is that the our community here, you know, continues to use the masks, sanitize, social distance, and you drive those rates down. And then we could potentially be utilizing those same measures to bring small groups back into the school, and potentially look at moving into another direction from there while some of this other stuff does get developed. But I just don't think it's going to be a magic bullet right at the end of the year, the way that, I mean, it could, but even if they have vaccinations that come out, it could be, there could be limits on who gets those, to the point of not being able to feel absolutely 100% sure about opening school.
Well, that's important to know that this is your field, and I appreciate the information. That's important to know. Um, you know, um, is there anything else that you want to discuss regarding the budget or any of the items on the agenda? I've kind of stated my case. I don't want to repeat myself. I've said enough, and I think you know where we're at and what we're trying to do. Um, if I may go off subject here for just a little, and in terms of board packets, I need to know if you're having difficulty, please tell me, call me direct, send me an email and just tell me, Alex, look, I'm not getting my packet. I never heard anything from Sally Brownfield about packets. We thought it was all solved. I thought everything was fine. And so all you got to do, if you call me and you're saying to me that you're not getting information, I can guarantee you I'm going to jump on it. I will call Brenda, I will call Glenn, and I will do everything that we can do to get you what you need to do your work. So, Lynn, are you having problems right now getting your packet and information?
Yeah, I've been having problems all along and have been emailing back and forth with Glenn and Allison and Brenda. And but I thought it was a login issue, like tied to my password and things like that. But and then Glenn indicated that maybe it was an issue with the website. So that's when I started, after Sally made her comment, I decided to kind of look at maybe we need to rethink how we distribute those, because it's a very cumbersome process anyways. It should be very simple for both sides, I would think.
Can I tag on to that? It was a school messenger problem to start. They finally got their upload done, then we thought it was fixed because we hadn't heard back again. But Glenn, I saw emails going back and forth with you guys. He's actually working on a different method for them to get to them, which I think will be easier for everyone involved. So I think he's working on it tonight as we speak. So,
Well, and if it doesn't work, please let me know, and we'll do something to get it corrected immediately.
yeah, he's got a folder set up now that he wants you to try out, Lynn, it looks like. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it.
And then have we made contact with Sally Brownfield today?
I don't know about today. I shared with Glenn during the board meeting what she was saying, and he reached out to her right then, and I haven't seen her respond back to him. So,
Okay, well, we'll follow up. And will you let me know, Lynn, if everything is okay with you or if you're continuing to have a problem?
Yes, yeah, I will.
Thank you very much.
Going back to the budget, I think the only question that I had, we touched on it a little bit with, the secretaries and somewhat with the teachers, but how is staffing working out right now for, the other levels? We talked about that a little bit with bus drivers too, but, the custodians and, are we able to meet the need right now in that, in
Yeah,
any of those
Robert,
other staffing areas?
Robert shared that custodians were fine with where we're at with not having kids in the buildings. So he said we're doing okay there. I don't know, Alex, you can take on.
Well, just in other words, in terms of the custodians that we've held on to, we're maintaining our buildings.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that their kids aren't there, or not many kids are there, and very few staff overall. But we're maintaining the buildings. So we asked that very question. I forget when that was, on Tuesday.
I think it was our cabinet meeting. We talked about it.
We talked, and he said, we're doing fine. So, and of course, food service, Paris.
All righty, that sounds good. Any other questions or comments? All righty, I don't see any more. So I think we have taken in a lot of information today, asked a lot of questions, and had quite a lot of discussion. So I think it's was a productive meeting, and thank you all for attending. Is there
Excuse
any
me.
last? Go ahead.
Well, does the board want to continue the every Thursday meetings, or do you want to alternate every 2 weeks? I mean, obviously, I want to keep you informed. That's my number one priority.
Yeah.
If there's a different way you want to do it, please let me know.
Perhaps maybe the meeting that is just 2 days after a board meeting may be, maybe there's not enough as things start to settle down a little bit. Maybe that might stretch. Maybe we want to try offsetting the meeting in between board meetings. Other board members have thoughts or comments?
Just let me know what you'd like to do. And if an emergency comes up and it's absolutely necessary that we meet, then I would let you know. But if you want to come up with a different schedule, just let me know what you want to do. And we can always, under difficult situations, we can always meet whenever. But in general, I think during this year, it would behoove us to continue to meet rather regularly, but it doesn't have to be every week. Like you just mentioned, Sandy, just let me know what you want to do.
Shall we go ahead and schedule, plan for next Thursday? And then we'll leave the following Thursday, to be decided later.
Be determined, that'd be fine.
Uh-huh.
If everybody wants to do it that way.
Carrie, Lynn, and Sally, does that seem acceptable? I think that puts us into that in-between board meeting week.
And I would like to request we don't do the week of the 24th because I'm picking my daughter up at the airport that afternoon.
And that would be 2 weeks.
I only get it for 2 days. I got to take advantage of it.
And if you've got to do that, we could still have the meeting, and I would do the best I could to respond to any questions.
Okay.
Depending on what's going on at the time too.
Yeah. Carrie, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if we did it every other week, offsetting the school board meetings, I know in the past when we've needed to have an additional meeting, we've front loaded that onto the board meeting. We've done a study session before the board meeting. So we're, again, just taking up one day instead of multiple days. I mean, right now I have it built in my schedule to do it every Thursday. And I'm always going to be open for if there's a need for an emergency meeting. I do myself have to go here in about 5 minutes because I have to run a program that begins at 6 o'clock for work. But, usually I can make a 4:30 meeting work at any time. But we did used to put some of that in the beginning of school board meetings if it was necessary.
Just let me know and we'll go ahead and do what you need.
Yeah, and we probably need to talk to Sally and find out what.
Yeah.
Because if she's busy and Thursdays are not working for her, we need to find that out too.
Yeah,
All right.
that's fine.
Right.
Just let me know.
All righty.
And I will let you know if there's something that comes up that's absolutely necessary for us to get together. I will let you know that too.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Hope you all do too.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good
Good night. See ya.